Welcome in, everyone. So glad you're joining us for today's deep dive. I want you to start by just picturing something for a second.
Oh, I love a good visualization to start things off.
Right. So imagine walking into this completely sterile, ultra-modern, contemporary art gallery.
Okay, so we're talking pure white walls, polished concrete floors.
Exactly. The kind of place with that really clinical LED lighting that leaves absolutely nowhere to hide. Just a vast, empty room.
Feels a little intimidating, honestly.
Totally. But now, picture hanging right in the dead center of that room is a massive, incredibly ornate, centuries-old tapestry.
Oh, wow. That is quite the visual.
Right. Every single inch of it is covered in heavy, hand-stitched detailing. And it's just sitting there in this white box.
That is a very violent collision of eras, visually speaking.
It really is. But that specific friction, that clash, isn't just some eccentric art installation concept. It turns out that exact juxtaposition is the secret to solving one of the most difficult problems in modern digital design.
Which is such a fascinating leap to make.
Yeah. And to explore how that works, we are pulling from a really brilliant source today. It's a blog post from June 10th, 2026, by a creator named Ang.
And the title is Notes on Typesetting, Part 30, Applying Ethnic Textile Patterns to Modern Cover Design.
That's the one. And what I love about this piece is that the whole thing kicks off not in a coding environment or a design studio, but with a moment of just pure offline serendipity.
Which, is so often the catalyst for the most enduring design frameworks.
Yeah, you think so?
Oh, absolutely. You can sit there staring at screen layouts for weeks trying to solve a problem with padding or margins. But the breakthrough usually happens when you force yourself into a completely different sensory environment.
And Aang definitely did that. They were just wandering through a recent book fair.
Right, specifically an exhibition hall that was entirely dedicated to Chinese books.
And if you've ever been to a major book fair, you know they're generally just a total sensory nightmare.
Oh, 100%.
You have thousands of publishers crammed into a convention center, and every single book cover is literally screaming for your attention.
Yeah, they're all utilizing the exact same bright colors, the same massive, bold fonts.
The same marketing tricks, right?
Right.
And very quickly, it all just flattens into this overwhelming background noise. You honestly stop seeing individual books.
Well, the visual cortex simply taps out at a certain point.
It does.
Yeah, when a space is filled with thousands of objects that are designed specifically to trigger an immediate psychological response.
Like a loud book cover.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The brain just defends itself by glossing over everything. But Aang experiences this massive pattern interrupt. They get stopped dead in their tracks by one specific cover.
Because this cover just abandoned that modern marketing arms race entirely.
Right. It cut through all that extreme visual clutter by doing something fundamentally different on a structural level.
And this brings us right back to that tapestry in the white gallery metaphor. Because the cover Aang describes leans heavily into cultural heritage.
But it pairs that rich heritage with incredibly stark, minimalist, structured typography.
Yes. You have the raw, organic, hyper-dense complexity of the heritage pattern stacked directly against the cold, calculated precision of modern minimalism.
Which is such a delicate balance to strike. Because, think about it, if a designer ignores that minimalist typography.
Like if they just use a traditional font.
Right. If they just slap an ornate, classical serif font over traditional weaving, the brain instantly categorizes that object as an archival artifact.
Oh, interesting. Like it belongs in a museum.
Exactly. It feels like a university anthropology textbook. It belongs in a display case, not on a modern bookshelf.
So it communicates history, but it completely fails to communicate immediate relevance to the reader.
Yes. But injecting that minimalist typography completely changes the psychological framing for the viewer.
It forces you to see the ancient craftsmanship not as some dusty relic of the past, but as a highly contemporary, deliberate piece of art.
It tells you, the reader, that the ideas inside this book are highly relevant to you right now, today. Yeah.
But pulling off that juxtaposition is actually incredibly dangerous, isn't it?
Oh, very. You are playing with highly volatile design elements.
Right. So to understand why the stark modern text actually works here, we first have to look at the sheer, overwhelming complexity of the foundation it's sitting on.
The heritage pattern itself.
Exactly. Let's look at the actual craftsmanship here. Because Aang highlights specific ethnic textile patterns originating from the Guangxi region of China.
And we really need to emphasize, this isn't just a flat, simple geometric print generated in Illustrator.
No, not at all. We are talking about visual representations of incredibly complex stitching.
Intricate beadwork.
Deeply layered woven fabrics. We are looking at generations of inherited techniques that are deeply, deeply tied to a specific cultural identity.
And the physical materials of those textiles dictate a very specific color palette, too.
Right. Eng describes these vibrant, earthy, really profound tones, specifically deep reds, heavy maroons, and rich golds.
And in the realm of design theory, those specific darker tones inherently carry a massive amount of visual weight.
Which brings up a huge question for me. I'm looking at Eng's description of these heavy maroon and gold woven beads. And honestly, my first thought is that this has to be an absolute nightmare for readability.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Like, I'm just remembering the early days of the internet, building a custom profile page on some forum.
Oh no, where's this going?
Well, I thought it would be absolute genius to put neon green text directly over a repeating tiled background image of a dark brick wall.
Oh, that is a classic early web mistake.
It was completely unreadable. So when a designer uses such a heavy, visually loud mix of beadwork and stitching, doesn't a literal visual feast of Guangxi craftsmanship happening in the background risks just swallowing the book title whole?
It's a great question. And that early internet aesthetic you mentioned is actually a flawless example of ignoring cognitive load.
Cognitive load.
Yeah. Darker colors and intricate textured details act like visual gravity. They demand the eye's focus.
So they're basically pulling your attention away from the text.
Exactly. Dropping typography directly over that level of density doesn't just create clutter, it creates instant visual fatigue.
Because there's too much going on.
Right. The human eye physically struggles to pull the letter forms out from the beadwork. The brain has to work overtime just to distinguish where a woven gold thread ends and the edge of a letter begins.
And the modern reader just isn't going to put up with that kind of friction.
Not a chance. They abandon the effort in milliseconds and scroll to the next thing or walk right past the book.
The eye absolutely requires a moment of rest.
Yes. It needs a designated safe zone to process the actual title and author information.
So if the eye inevitably gives up on this visual gravity, how did this physical book cover force Eng to keep looking? Because they didn't mute the colors.
No, they kept them vibrant.
And they didn't blur out the beautiful Guangxi textiles either.
Nope.
They literally just slapped a piece of paper right across the middle of it.
Which is such a brilliant, elegant solution. They utilized an obi.
An obi. Let's unpack that because it's so crucial here. An obi is a wraparound paper band, right?
Yeah, it's very common in Japanese and Chinese publishing.
It usually sits right over the dust jacket, wrapped around the middle or maybe the bottom third of the book.
And it acts as a physical intervention.
A physical intervention.
Yeah.
Like it literally gets in the way of the art.
Exactly. By placing a stark, blank paper band squarely over the complex Guangxi textiles, the designer introduces an active structural element.
I really love this concept. It's like a sudden clearing in a dense forest.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Like you are hacking your way through this incredibly heavy, vibrant, overwhelming ancient woods. The stitching, the beads, the dark reds, and then suddenly you just step out into an open space.
Just clear sky.
Right, there's nothing fighting for your attention.
And we often talk about negative space or white space in design as if it's just an empty area where the printer forgot to put ink.
Yeah, like it's just leftover room.
Right. But Eng makes this crucial observation that the obi provides a clean contrast. It is a deliberate shield against the background noise.
It guarantees the minimalist text is legible, obviously. But Eng points out something much more subtle about how this works, don't they?
They do. That stark paper band actually amplifies the impact of the busy patterns below it.
Wait, really? Covering it up makes it more impactful.
Yeah, because contrast is a two-way street. A sea of complex beadwork stretching uninterrupted across an entire cover eventually just looks messy.
It stops being detailed and just becomes a blur.
Right. It becomes a texture rather than a focal point. But when you interrupt that beadwork with a razor-sharp, perfectly clean band of negative space...
Like the obi.
Exactly. The brain suddenly has a baseline to compare the complexity against.
Oh, I see.
The beadwork instantly looks richer, deeper, and more intricate, while the text living inside the obi looks even sharper and more modern.
So the obi essentially manages a peace treaty between the ancient craftsmanship and the modern typography.
That's exactly what it does. They aren't fighting each other for the reader's attention anymore.
Because they each have their own fiercely protected real estate.
And this tactile physical interaction, I mean, the actual physical thickness of a smooth paper band resting on top of heavily textured woven cloth, That is the exact mechanism Aang is pulling into the digital world.
Right, because Aang isn't just writing some aesthetic critique of a nice book cover they saw.
No, they are reverse engineering a physical interaction to solve a massive digital scaling problem.
Which brings us to section 4, the actual application of all this theory. Because Aang is taking this highly physical historical inspiration and using it for a modern digital tool.
Their Xs2 ebook project.
Right. For context, Xs2 ebook is Aang's project that converts web serials into polished, properly formatted digital books.
And web serials, for anyone who hasn't read them, are often just massive raw text files posted online.
Yeah, and they're notorious for having either completely non-existent covers or just incredibly poorly auto-generated ones.
So Aang is trying to build a system that can generate beautiful, culturally resonant covers dynamically.
Dynamically meaning it works no matter what the title is, right?
Exactly. Regardless of the book's title length or the author's name, the system adapts.
And here is where the technical leap really happens. Aang is building these covers using Typesetting.
Which is a whole different beast.
Right. For those unfamiliar, Typesetting is not a drag-and-drop design tool like Photoshop or Canva.
No, you can't just use your mouse to nudge a title around until it looks right.
It is a highly programmatic, code-based typesetting system. You literally write markup language, and it compiles a perfectly aligned, mathematically precise PDF document.
It relies on absolute positioning, precise margin calculations, rigorous bounding boxes.
Is the absolute definition of cold, programmed digital output.
It really is.
Which, I have to say, it brings up a really interesting tension here. Maybe even a massive inherent irony in this entire endeavor.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, we have this aesthetic that is entirely defined by its physical touch. The literal bump of a glass bead. The microscopic fraying of a silk thread.
The rich tactile reality of Guangxi textiles.
Exactly. And the literal physical overlapping of a paper band that casts a tiny microscopic shadow on the fabric beneath it.
Right.
And Aang is taking all of that and turning it into flat lines of code in Typesetting. Doesn't something massive get lost when you crush a rich 3D physical object into a flattened digital PDF?
It's a totally fair question.
Like, why not just use a photo editing tool to make a static image?
Well, practically speaking, a static image doesn't scale. If you are generating hundreds of covers for wildly different web serials, you need a programmatic system.
Okay, that makes sense from an efficiency standpoint.
But your pushback actually highlights the central tension of modern user interface design.
How so?
We exist in a physical world, right? Our brains evolved over millions of years to process physical depth, texture, shadows, and layering.
We understand how physical objects stack on top of each other.
Exactly. But the digital medium, by its very nature, is completely flat and sterile. It's really just pixels firing behind a sheet of glass.
Yeah, there's no actual depth on a screen.
Right. Which is why the digital folder icon on your desktop still looks like a manila folder from a 1950s filing cabinet.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I never really thought about that, but it totally does.
It's because the best digital design almost always borrows the logic of the physical world. That is the language our brains already speak fluently.
Okay, I see where this is going.
TIPS code doesn't weave actual thread, obviously, but it can use absolute positioning to carve out a mathematical safe zone on the screen.
The clearing in the forest.
Yes, it can create a vector-based bounding box where no background raster image pixels are allowed to render.
So it's artificially forcing the concept of a physical OB onto a completely flat screen.
Exactly. By programming a layout in TIPS that layers a clean, structured digital block over a deeply textured digital image of Guangxi beadwork, Aang is basically tricking the eye.
It's structural mimicry.
That's a great term for it. The code enforces the exact same visual rules that made the physical beadwork beautiful and legible to look at in the very first place.
Because the underlying math of good design doesn't change, does it?
Not at all. It doesn't matter if the medium changes from physical thread to compiled PDF code. The human eye's absolute requirement for a safe zone of negative space to read typography that remains constant.
And the cultural resonance, the heavy visual weight of those deep reds and golds, that remains constant too.
Precisely. You don't have to invent new rules for the digital space. You just have to look incredibly closely at how the physical world solved the exact same problem centuries ago.
And then just write the code to simulate that physical boundary.
Exactly. The designer in that exhibition hall understood the history of their physical craft, and Aang understood how to translate the logic of that history into the programmatic future of digital typesetting.
It's such a brilliant synthesis. And honestly, for anyone listening to this right now, There is a tremendously valuable mental model here that you can apply immediately, regardless of what industry you work in.
Absolutely. The applications go way beyond book covers.
Right. If you are dealing with overwhelming, complex information, maybe you are designing a dense data dashboard or trying to format a massive internal company report.
Or even just laying out a presentation slide that has way too much text on it.
Exactly. The immediate panicked instinct is almost always to just dumb it down,
Oh, always.
to strip away the complexity, because it just feels too heavy for the audience.
This often ruins the actual value of the information.
Yes. But this design philosophy teaches a completely different approach. Protect the complexity.
Don't destroy the intricate details of your data or your design just because it looks visually loud.
You just need to wrap a clean, structured OB around it.
Create a designated zone of contrast. Give the audience's eye a pristine, heavily protected place to rest and process the core message.
And let all that beautiful, heavy complexity exist around the margins.
Right. You use the negative space to shield the reader from the noise, which ironically makes them appreciate the noise even more.
You build your own clearing in the forest.
I love that analogy so much.
But, as you take that concept and apply it to your own work today, there is a lingering thought from Ang's project that I really want to leave you with.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we spent this entire time marveling at how brilliantly Ang translates these deeply physical, historical elements
Yeah.
into mathematical code, right?
Yeah, and it really is an incredible technical achievement to automate that level of aesthetic quality.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah.
But, and this is what I keep getting stuck on, if digital frameworks like Tipst can now so perfectly replicate the visual framing of physical beadwork,
Yeah.
if an algorithm can flawlessly simulate the exact visual weight and bounding box of a wraparound paper band, what actually happens to our long-term perception of a book?
Oh, wow. That is a big question.
Right. When all of these deeply tactile, culturally rich, historical elements are just permanently flattened onto a glowing screen, do we eventually forget that they were ever supposed to be touched in the first place?
That's profound. The texture becomes just a picture of texture.
Exactly.
So-
It's definitely something to think about the next time you are scrolling through a perfectly formatted digital library.
And a good reminder to keep seeking out that physical inspiration.
Totally. Keep looking for those unexpected moments of offline inspiration out there in the real world, and we'll be right here waiting to dive into the next one with you.